Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to day 13, April 7th. Good morning, Penny.
Good morning. It's opening day of baseball season, you told me.
It is opening day of baseball season. That is correct.
What's with the Dodgers hat? You usually have your Angels.
Oh, did you say Angels?
There you go.
I know it's kind of hard to defend, but I grew up as a Dodger fan, and it's my primary team. But I live very close to where the Angels play, and so for 30 years I've been an Angel season ticket holder, and so I kind of root for both teams. Which is kind of a weird thing. But when they play each other, I root for the Dodgers.
You do?
I do.
Oh.
So we bring up the issue of baseball because you brought up the issue of baseball yesterday when you ambushed me with this essay called "Baseball is Dying, the Government Should Take Over," which, if you want to see that, we'll put the link in the Padlet. And you asked me to respond on the spot without having read it, kind of jokingly.
Yes.
And so I went back and I did read it, and I have it in front of me. And I think you and I kind of talked off camera about how we might bring an essay like this into the classroom, and how we approach it might help kids think about, the moves that writers make.
Yeah. Can I just, before we go any farther though, into what to do, a couple things struck me. Number one, this essay is 1,100 words, and that is a really typical assignment at college. You get 1,000-word responses to assignments often across curriculum. And so an article of this length, although it is 2 and a little bit longer pages, might feel like a long essay to work with in class, but it's actually really representative of how do you develop your thinking through multiple ideas, right? And what I see on campus is that it might be an article that relates to something in the interdisciplinary course, like tackling a wicked problem. It might be about climate change. It might be something related to mass incarceration, but your response draws on the article, but is always really, what do you think? And it is intended to be really well crafted, which, regardless of how you feel about this piece, the language use is interesting. There's clarity in what is being said. So I feel like if anyone thinks about that Padlet we designed for essays, where we were trying to say in our new book that the teaching of essay really needs a revision in schools, right? That there was this need to pass tests that drove a formulaic kind of essay writing that has to be balanced with these longer essays and really understanding how to think about them with students, particularly high school students.
Yeah, I mean, if we could revisit that idea we've shared a number of times, right? That Four Essential Studies actually was born out of your realization as a college, first year college composition teacher, that kids were coming to you who had gotten good grades in high school, but were unprepared to write what we would refer to as a much more authentic essay, not a school essay, but an essay that either explores your thinking or makes an argument. In this case, this essay makes an argument.
Can I add one thing to that? We, on our campus this fall, I was part of a group that was across many different disciplines. And the problem in front of us was the number of kids who fail in first year courses, and what kinds of course corrections can the university take so that those students will stay on path to graduate. And so they were talking about some kind of modules that we might institute at the college level to teach skills that kids didn't have. And the reason I ended up on the call was that I proposed we teach kids how to read longer essays with both the lens of craft and the lens of content. And the other was in particular about these open-ended responses. And what was interesting to me is that the gathering of the people there again and again named that kids were taking 1,000-word assignment, this length, and writing 5 paragraphs. And the first paragraph looked just like the last paragraph. It said, this is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I told you. And they kept saying on the call, why isn't First Composition taking care of this problem? And I said, well, imagine that the students are in your class while they're in my class. So they are learning something that obviously we all think they should learn in high school, which is to write deeply and expansively about something without a limit on the number of paragraphs and so that's the piece that we're not thinking about. Composition class is not going to correct it because kids are immersed the first week of school with these kinds of assignments.
Right. And often without a rubric, often without, modeling from the teacher.
Right.
And so we have to teach kids before they get there.
Well, and it's definitely on teachers in college to model what they want.
Yes.
And the fact that they're not, I completely agree with high school teachers who are like, why aren't they teaching it? They should teach it as well. Right. That's what I'm doing from the minute I get there. But the fact that we can get our kids to think more expansively in writing in response to other issues and ideas happening.
So if you were to bring this into class, how might you approach it? How might you start with it?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking opening day of baseball season, I probably have baseball pictures, my kid playing Little League, how much I have loved going to games, and would perhaps even have take me out to the ball game playing as they walk in. I love to have music in my class as they arrive, but might do a quick turn and talk over baseball, any baseball related memory, might use a couple poems. Ralph Fletcher has some great baseball poems. But I was thinking in particular to this essay, I often have students quick write. So I would read it out loud so they can hear it read, and then they would respond in quick writing to the content.
So it's interesting because via texting before we came on, we just texted each other and said, why don't we do a little quick write? So we did, and this is completely unrehearsed. I have absolutely no idea what Penny is about to share. But let's go ahead. What was your quick write? What did it take?
I can't believe you asked me first because I honestly sat with it and I did quick write notes all over the draft and never got to a quick write. I wrote one sentence and went, I don't really want to write that. I wrote, I'm really not interested in this topic.
Isn't that blasphemous? But okay.
I know. But also, isn't that true? There's always going to be kids who are like me.
Two things. Number one, it's very important that you model that, because a lot of times teachers, who have bought into this idea that they should write in front of their kids, get up to write in front of their kids, and then it doesn't flow. Right. And I think it's important that kids say that. I mean, years ago, I remember one of my favorite authors, William Styron, who wrote Sophie's Choice.
Yeah.
He only put out a book about every 10 years. And somebody asked him one time, why does it take so long between your books? And he said, well, I have the syrup, but sometimes it doesn't pour. Right. And so
good line.
You're going to stand in front of the class, and some days that syrup is not going to pour. And I think that that's a really valuable thing to say. The second thing I would say about that, which is I think really funny since this is unrehearsed, is the exact same thing happened to me.
No.
I started to write. For me, it's the opposite though, because it's not that I find it boring. I find the topic so expansive and so many different things that I could write about that I just started spinning in all different ways. I started by writing opening day is a metaphor. It is hope springs eternal. The entire season lies ahead. Everyone has a chance. The unexpected awaits. Right?
Nice.
Who will be the breakout players? Who will be the villains? Who will be the surprise stories? Right. And so
you had nothing to write. Oh, come on. That's great.
Okay. I wrote that for about 2 minutes. And then I started getting into many people dislike, because I came back to this ridiculous argument. And many people dislike baseball because it's slow. I like baseball because it's slow. Baseball is a sport I turn to momentarily escape the problems of the world. And then
Kelly, I've got to pause here and put my dogs out. Can you hear them? They're going nuts. They want to go
bother
out.
me. I can hear them. It doesn't bother me.
but I need to let them out or I'm going to
Okay.
have trouble. Okay. So just hang
Okay,
on a
hold
second.
on.
Okay, we're back. And that means if the bears don't eat them, I can stay here and keep recording. The bears are out.
So I was thinking about what a what a refuge from the world's problems, those 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours in the ballpark is, and
Nice.
then how peaceful it is. And then my last little pivot at the end was I actually got hurt at a professional baseball game from a foul ball. I went to catch it and it went right over my hand and it caught the top and ripped off my fingernail.
Oof.
Which is a gruesome story. So I ended up thinking what that would be kind of a good story to tell. But as I said, it's such an expansive topic that I'm all over the place. But
I don't know. You captured two such important things in that quick write. Just the refuge idea, the idea of, I don't know, escape. And then the metaphor. I love that.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this in other workshops, right? If you do a quick write today and a quick write tomorrow and a quick write the next day, that somewhere in there is a seed for something bigger and better. And sometimes, this idea, how do you turn a quick write into an essay? I think sometimes people get the idea that you quick write something, it comes out, and then that exactly gets expanded into an essay. And I think sometimes it's the quick write that leads you to A, then to B, then to C, and then it's the C that becomes the essay. I don't know.
And I think our students often think that the quick write is the rough draft, and then I clean that up and that's done, right? They're not seeing it as part of the journey unless they do it a lot. And my kind of petulant, I don't really want to write about baseball. It just reminded me so clearly again that I don't have that many memories of baseball in ways that are really important to me. And I am filled with other things that are important to me. And so there's always like this feeling of, okay, I have to study this essay because I told Kelly we would do this for this, but it's a task. I'm not immersed in this. I'm not getting fired up basically about anything. I think some of it's really ridiculous, but that's not enough to get me going. And how different it is when you're learning to be fully engaged, like, I want to figure this out. And when you're just kind of going along.
Well, and the other element of that comes to mind is that, we choose provocations for them to respond to. And that choice is so important. And obviously you're not going to massively engage every kid every day.
Yep.
But the idea of trying to find those things that will provoke thinking, and you know what, maybe the angle, and I'm just thinking out loud here, right? Maybe the angle here isn't to provoke a meaningful essay. Maybe the angle here is more, let's look at the moves and techniques that are employed here so that when you go to argue something that you are interested in, you may adopt some of the moves that are in this essay.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I think that that's why you study a stack of texts. You don't have just one essay that you look at, because then you're going to be very conscious about choosing from different content areas and that have different moves in them. So one of the big points of 4 essential studies that I think is critical, important, we both have said we didn't do enough of it early in our career, is to take a piece of writing and say, what are the chunks that make it work? What would you call this and this and this, which is what we both agreed to do with this essay.
What are the building blocks? First, the writer does this in this chunk, and then there's usually a pivot where he goes from this idea to this idea. And once you understand how the building blocks are stacked, then I think that also encourage you to think about maybe the building blocks could be rearranged. But you're right. I think, we were really good at looking at, for example, in this essay, he uses a metaphor that baseball is like American jazz, right? And so there's little micro moves like using metaphor here or thesis statement there, but that there's really a value, as we call it in the book, the drone view, looking down at the essay as a whole and looking at that. So without talking to one another, we sort of chunked it on our own. Should we share that?
Yeah. And you know what I think is, I always say to students, we're just making guesses and our own observations about how it's put together, no right or wrongs. In that, I want kids to have the freedom, but I am a little nervous. Like, did you chunk it the way I did? Did I do this right? You know, there's this like live, I'm not sure. So I'm going to tell you what I did, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So the very first paragraph, and we're going to post this again if people are interested, has the claim, but also a tone. And I describe the tone as poking the bear. This is incendiary by purpose, really, you know, a little snarky. So then the next two paragraphs I called evidence number one. There aren't enough viewers. So his evidence for the argument that baseball needs to be put under the authority of a larger federal entity, which was like, what? And then the next two paragraphs I call evidence number two, that numbers hide the actual people that are watching it. So even though numbers are bad in one, number two is deepening number one by saying the numbers aren't even right. They're worse. And then evidence three is what I took the next three paragraphs, including the one sentence paragraph, to say young people aren't interested. So the sport itself is culturally irrelevant. And we're going to go back to later the evidence that's used, because I don't think it's strong there for young people aren't interested. But the next part, I actually made a different color because I tend to go like a claim opening paragraph, one color, and then evidence is all the same color, just chunked. But the next three paragraphs, I called the solution, what it would look like. So I'm proposing this is why, here's what it would look like. And then he returns to it's irrelevant and outdated, but he's kind of camouflaged that in the sentence, do not confuse my intentions. It's like he's trying to say, listen, I'm not trying to trash baseball. Here's what I really, to me, it didn't sink for me. Like, oh yeah, that's true. I was, at any rate, that's where the metaphors came in. And then there are three paragraphs where he's talking again about his claim, but he returns with a really kinder tone. It's like, I got you in and I started slamming you. And now I'm telling you that actually my opening was meant to say that I love this, right? He uses the word love, a position of love in his final paragraph. So he's definitely coming in hard like a fastball. Perhaps I don't know this metaphor. Once he's landed it in the glove, he's trying to soften what happened.
Then he throws a change up.
Oh, whatever that is. So go ahead. What were you thinking?
Very, very similar. Opening paragraph basically ends with his thesis statement, right? He says here, professional baseball should be nationalized and put under the authority of some large federal entity. And much like you, I chunked three chunks of reason number one is the audience is dwindling. Reason number two is it's been artificially propped up. Reason number three is it's culturally irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Then the pivot, and he actually has the phrase, what is to be done?
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And nice. I think showing the kids the pivots in essay is really, really important.
It is. Good call.
Then he has sort of some ideas. One, government should see, the first thing that should be done is the government should seize teams. The second thing that should be done is once that happens, it will distribute revenues more equitably. And the third thing that will happen is that it will lead to imposing a salary cap in baseball. He veers in that paragraph, do not confuse my intentions. I wrote, he countered his own argument.
Yes.
There, like it didn't really make sense to me why that interruption was there. So I probably want to have that conversation with kids. And then he ends with kind of, if you adopt my plan, this is what might happen, and again, I'm an ally of baseball, but I got to tell you that, and maybe I would do this in a different step at a different time with kids, but I just did it concurrently. I don't know if you can see this. But on the left side, I'm making like, here's his major points.
Mhm.
But as I'm reading it, I did a whole column of what did he not say? What's left out of this essay? And here he says this, but he doesn't say that. I'll give you one example. And by the way, I agree with his thesis that baseball is losing popularity. I think that's pretty clear.
But that's not his claim, is not losing popularity. His claim is so the government should take it over, which,
well,
right?
I was just about to say,
Yeah,
his claim is that baseball is circling the drain.
right.
And the way to say it's the way to save it that I find completely ridiculous, personally.
Yeah.
And so,
Kelly, can we just pause for a second here?
Yeah.
I want to say yesterday or 2 days ago when we interviewed Lucy, she made the point that the language had changed in the test from expanding to developing, expanding an idea to developing. And that's what's changed with thesis to claim. And I just wanted to clarify why I keep saying claim, and I got practiced in it because the Common Core began to say claim, right? Yeah. And I wanted my kids hearing claim again and again. And I think that's just something that we continually do, which is revise our language based on what we're hoping they take away. So I didn't want to like keep correcting, like I felt like I was correcting you, and that wasn't my intent.
No, in fact, I didn't even know I said the word, because I use the word claim in classroom all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I want to hear
that's
that
okay.
Didn't mention.
But well, one thing he says is that, popularity of baseball is rapidly declining while football remains super, popular. And it is true that football is the national sport in a way, by popularity. What he does not say is that there has been a massive decline in football. I even looked it up. There's been a massive decline in youth participation, high school participation, college attendance, Super Bowl viewing. It's all down. A lot of it perhaps connected to the CTE problem, the brain injury problems. Parents are looking for other healthier sports for their kids to participate, which I think why soccer is really one of the reasons why soccer is exploding in the country. And so again, I think part of reading argument is asking what is not said. And I would just
really smart.
I would also just say that the most ridiculous, I find, part of his argument is that, as the audience dies off, baseball revenue will plummet, which is probably true, but the market will adjust. I mean, if the baseball teams are not receiving revenue from cable companies anymore, they're not going to pay players money they don't have. The game will, it may be painful, but the game will adjust, right? And like American jazz, baseball's never going away. It may be a smaller niche, but he kind of has some language in here where he feels like it's going to die if we don't do something.
Even in his opening title.
Right.
Baseball doesn't he use dying? Yeah. Because I found, I wrote in there that he uses the language irrelevant, outdated, and it echoes this dying, irrelevant. If the young people don't like it, we shouldn't do it. And I think that what struck me was that, we vacation on Cape Cod sometimes, and there's a really very fun kind of pickup, but very competitive league that goes on with young kids, like teenagers, that you go to a game, the stands are filled with people that are just hanging out, having a good time watching baseball. Right. And I think about going to my son's all-star games and Little League games in town, and the stands would be sparsely filled, mostly parents, but we always have students from Europe that come here to work in the summer with our tourists, and they would flock to these games. They're all free. Like, the game itself is entertaining. I loved watching my son play, and my husband coached him. And I think that what's wrong about this, you and I went to that game in Wisconsin where it was a minor league team, very raucous, excited crowd, really fun. They're missing the point that we are all looking for healthy escapes and to hang out with friends and to do things. And what better than going to some game? Now, I don't attend many Red Sox games. They're wicked expensive and it is fun to go, but I'm just not sure that it's worth the cost,
Right.
all of the costs. And so I think maybe the argument that he's trying to make that it's not worth what it is, you counter really well with the market will adjust. I think that's a really wise way to look at it. And also when he compared it to, it's like saying Henry James is I was like, oh, you're killing me. I love Henry James. But I think that there's a bit of ageism here. The only people who care about it are over 57 or whatever he said. And that's just not true in my town. There's actually a parade on opening day. We were talking about it a couple of weeks ago with some of my son and his friends. And I have pictures of them all lined up and they'd wear their uniforms and everyone parades through town, all the teams from all over.
The city of St. Louis has a parade on opening day every year.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the culture of that
Sure.
city. I would also just say very briefly that when I looked at his solution as the government taking over all 30 major league teams, I actually had to go back and look to see if it was printed on April 1st.
Oh,
I did. I actually thought for a moment it was tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But it's not. And so anyways, this idea of, and I got to say, this has become increasingly difficult, but as you know, for 15 years, I've been posting article of the week. I try to post a news article, a news article that may have, the president did this, the Republicans didn't like it, the Democrats liked it, but there's a balance in there somewhere. It's getting harder to do that because opinion has infiltrated news. Depending on where you get your news is how that's going to be angled. If you get it from the left, it's going to be angled a certain way. If you get it from the right, it's going to be angled a certain way. So the skill of what is not said, and I would say, who said it and do we trust this person?
Right.
Is really two reading questions that we really want to play with. Now, having said that, looking at this article, this essay, okay, you got sort of this introduction. Here's my reasoning. Here's my counter. That's a very good roadmap, I think, for kids to argue something that has nothing to do about baseball at all.
Right. And I think it's important that people know who don't know Article of the Week very well, that you designed it originally to increase the prior knowledge of your students, that there were gaps in their understanding of the world at large. It wasn't to create a particular opinion or to sway your students one way or the other. And that's why you're wrestling with that.
Well, you have to know stuff to read stuff. Right. And so,
the other piece I would say about this is that I read first, as I always do, Drone View, but then I started looking at particular craft moves that I'd want kids to notice. And I asked them to do it first. So we create a list. We got a list of craft moves that you guys noticed. And then I would add to that. And I think one of the pieces I would want to be sure and talk to them about, there is the really intentional incendiary language. It is not just somehow valuable, it's insanely valuable. There's this there's a lot that feels like he was just banging those keys as he was typing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and then there's the more traditional things that you would want them to notice in an argument. He uses statistics. He's got a lot of studies he refers to. He does use metaphor and compare it, although I don't agree with them. He does use metaphor, and I would say, as you said earlier, I think you said at the very beginning, his voice is very strong. Where do you hear his voice? Could you hide, I would ask the kids, where do you hear his personality? Here, 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 and here,
Yeah. And I would ask kids, when he states facts, right? To me, there's this intentional lack of specificity, right? You look at the line, participation in Little League has decreased by nearly 50% in some parts of the country. Well, come on, is it many? Is it
Yeah.
only in particular regions.
Right.
I felt that it was intentionally vague when he was trying to prop up something that he believes strongly is true, but I'm not sure if the data backs that up. And I just think that those kinds of critical reading moves are important for kids to notice. This is published in the New York Times, and it is going to get a lot of readers, so what kind of techniques is he using?
It's interesting too, because the decline of football is also depending on the region.
Mhm.
In the South, has not declined at all,
Right.
but in other places. So that it raises so many, what's not said raises
Mhm.
so many interesting questions.
Mhm.
Well, today, as I said, is opening day. It is a metaphor.
Are you going?
Hope springs eternal. I had tickets to tonight's game, but I donated them to a charity that is raising money to feed families in the community where my old school is. So I donated those tickets, but we're going Friday night.
Nice. I know once baseball starts, like your schedule's all around baseball. Good for you.
Well, that was an interesting talk. I'm glad you sent me the article, and I had my chance to respond to it.
That's
So
right.
thank you all.
Happy opening day, Kelly. See you
All
guys
right.
very soon.